Your SKOUT Epic Arca-Swiss rail kit comes with everything you need to install. 2 armatures and the base, as well as 8 screws and 4 nuts. The longer screws will be for the base of the rail, the shorter screws and the nuts will engage your M-lock. First we need to remove the barrel, and that starts with releasing the barrel lock. A 3/16 Allen key can be inserted into the tool face, and a quarter turn is usually all that's needed to break this component loose. Once it's loose, you can then finish unscrewing it completely with your hand. You'll want to screw it all the way out and slide it up to the moderator. There is another component that remains in here, which we'll get to in a moment. Next, we'll want to make sure our cocking arm is in the rearmost position, and then we can release our barrel. Pressing down on the paddle on one side, lifting up on the lever on the other, our barrel is released. With a small wiggle, we can then pull the barrel out. You'll notice that friction ring I mentioned earlier comes out with the barrel. It can remain on for the remainder of this process. Your 3 components that will be attaching to the rifle are the 2 arms and the base plate. Here, this one is facing outward. You can see the conical screws, and this one's facing inwards. You can see the flat surfaces. You'll also notice a ledge here on the lower part and a block here on the upper part. That block is for the M-lock slot, and we've already installed our M-lock hardware, just hand fitting it for the next process. As we said, the hardware is already in from the previous step. We want to make sure there's at least 2 threads showing so we have sufficient room to slide the M-lock into place. With that done, we're going to make sure that our M-lock nuts are square to the M-lock block, and then go ahead and slide it into the middle position on our rifle's rail. You'll notice a small rear bias, and then clicking into place nice and flush. Using a 1/8 Allen key, you're simply going to tighten these screws just enough so that the arm does not fall off while we do the other side. No significant torque should be applied at this time. Switching to the other side, the process is identical. Once again, we want to make sure that we have it facing upwards with the M-lock block, our M-lock hardware square to the M-lock block, and sufficient space for it to drop in. Again, we're going to go for that middle slot, and with a slight rear angle, pop it into place. Again, we're only going to secure these enough so that the arms themselves don't fall off. Flipping the rifle over, we're going to now install our base plate. You'll notice the lands here on the base plate correspond to the lands on the arm on both sides, and that's going to give us a nice square connection when we tighten this hardware down. You'll notice that these 2 arms are still loose, and we want that because they need to float essentially into position and will be made square by affixing to this base plate. So to start, we're going to run the screws in by hand. The first screw is always the hardest. You want to make sure that you get it lined up and do not cross thread it. Just take your time and make sure you get it with your fingers, just first couple threads, to make sure it's good and lined up. Then we're going to run that screw in, again, just flush. We're not looking for tight. We just want to make sure the ledge engages with the base plate. Doing the same thing on the other side. It is advisable to go in a cross pattern just to help things remain square and apply even torque. Once again, at this point, we are only snugging these screws up, and once all 4 screws are in, then we will apply a small amount of torque in order to affix things. We're not using any Loctite in this location or any other type of thread locker. So once we have our final screw run in flush, we can then backtrack, and using the square end of our Allen wrench, we can then apply about a quarter turn of torque to all 4 bolts. You will notice that the base plate is flush with the bottom of the arms, and the slots engage into the arms themselves. If you do not see this engagement, then things are not properly lined up, and you need to backtrack and find out why it's not lined up. Once these are properly torqued, we can flip the rifle back around, and in its vertical position, we can now see the rail more or less where we want it to be. So the final step is to torque the rail to the rifle, and to do that we are going to move the rail to its forwardmost position in the slot to prevent any movement during recoil, and then tighten the 1/8 Allen key. In this case we are running in snug and then going for a quarter turn of torque again on these locations. Still no Loctite on the M-locks. They do lock against the rail, so there is no reason to use thread locker in any of these locations. Again, just a quarter turn of torque to make sure that they remain fixed. Installing the barrel, we want to slide it in. Make sure our probe is in the rearmost position, and then look for the air port. The air port corresponds to this lobe, and we want to make sure that they are facing down. With that facing down and our latch in the upward position, we can then press the barrel back into the latch block, and with a final push you'll feel a click, and you can then ratchet down your barrel. Before moving on, you do need to check the chamber to make sure that the barrel has fully inserted, and what we're looking for here is the lower lip of the barrel sleeve is flush with the breech block, and the upper lip of the barrel sleeve is protruding. You can check this with a magazine to make sure everything functions properly, dropping the magazine and running the action to make sure the engagement's there. The final step is resecuring our barrel lock. We're going to slide our friction ring down into the lock body and then follow it with our locking collar. Once again, this locking collar will run in the vast majority of the way just hand tight, and then you will finish it off with a 3/16 Allen key. This should be snug but not overly tight. About a quarter of a turn is all we're looking for here, just to have a firm lock on the barrel itself. Thank you for purchasing the SKOUT EPOCH Arca rail. Make sure to follow us on social media to keep in track of all of the cool new accessories that we're constantly developing.